Welcome to Municipal Affairs. Today, in our Alberta Municipalities Roundtable discussion, we'll be diving into crucial topics affecting municipalities across the province of Alberta. And joining us for today's discussion are our esteemed guests from Alberta Municipalities, President Tyler Gandam and Director Krista Gardner. Now, in today's discussion, we'll be chatting about the most recent Alberta Provincial Budget, grants in place of taxes, or as they more commonly are called, GIPOT, tariffs on Canadian products going into the United States, and what municipalities are hearing about the challenges on crime across the province. So stay with us as we dive into the top news across Alberta when it comes to municipalities. From the smallest village to the largest city, across every region of the province, Alberta Municipalities represents the communities where over 85% of Albertans live. AB Munis provides a united voice for 265 of Alberta's 330 municipalities, including summer villages, towns, cities, and specialized municipalities. As Alberta's largest municipal group, AB Munis listens to municipal leaders and advocates for solutions to their common issues. Additionally, AB Munis supports local governments by providing services specially designed to meet their operational needs. And they bring their members together regularly so they can share ideas and information so that their communities can thrive. Check out Alberta Municipalities at abmunis.ca and follow them on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, now called X.
President Gandam, Director Gardner, thank you so much for sitting down with me. This is our quarterly roundtable discussion about Alberta municipalities. And I want to start with the big story of, I guess, the month, the year, and that is Budget 2025. How does the Budget 2025 as proposed, because it's still going through the legislature, how does it impact municipalities, starting with Tyler?
I think we've got some wins and some work to do. GIPOT, or Grants in Place of Taxes, was a big win for municipalities across the province. I know the city of Edmonton had done a fairly large campaign as well, and that tens of millions of dollars of an impact it was for them. So very thankful that the province saw the importance of that. Premier Smith was at our fall convention and we spoke about it there. So it's nice that when we express some concerns about anything that the provincial government is doing that has an impact on municipalities, that they're open to that conversation and making those changes. So happy to see that we're getting 75% back this year, back to 100% next year. And it's probably close to 0.5% for the city of Wetaskiwin. So over the last 6 years, we've missed out on a few $100,000. Which could have gone to some of our infrastructure projects and lowered some of our debentures. But again, just happy that it's coming back and the province is listening to some of the concerns we have.
Now, I'm a municipal nerd, you're a municipal nerd, you both live it. What is GIPOT to the average resident? What does that mean? Grants in place of taxes, is that the province not paying their fair share? Explain it in layman's terms for those who might be listening.
So in your community, if you have provincially owned buildings, assets, hospitals, schools, provincial buildings, courthouses, government doesn't pay taxes to government. And so they pay grants in place of taxes. They're still receiving the same kind of services, so snow clearing, street sweeping, fire services, police, all of that stuff that the businesses and homeowners pay for. So they pay us a grant instead of paying the taxes, and now it'll be back to the equivalent of what property taxes would be on those buildings.
Awesome. For yourself, Director, what did this budget mean for Alberta municipalities in the towns area?
So another thing I think that we feel is a win, we had asked for LGFF funding to be commensurate with increases or decreases in provincial revenue. So we are seeing a slight increase in LGFF funding this year. And so that's a good thing for our smaller municipalities to get a little bit more money in that infrastructure bank to do our projects. Some other things, I think the things that we maybe consider losses, so to speak, stagnant funding on FCSS. That's a big concern for communities across the entire province. There's Tyler said there's good and bad, but
I think some of the gaps in the preventative funding that we were hoping to see FCSS is a big part of that for sure. And when the funding stays flat, it's actually a decrease when you take into consideration how much growth the province has seen over the last few years, inflation, and just a higher number of people using the social services in our communities. It's certainly a reduction in FCSS funding if you look at it that way.
One of the areas that I know Alberta Municipalities has been passionate about is talking about growth and the attraction of new residents to the communities. Now, this isn't just happening in Edmonton and Calgary. This is happening in Wetaskiwin. This is happening in Calmer. This is happening down in Milk River. This is happening across the province. In your discussions, either with Minister McIver, Municipal Affairs, whether it be Minister Nixon, who is Seniors in Housing, who is responsible for that FCSS, do you get a sense that they're willing to have that conversation about not just funding the large urban centers, but also the smaller communities, the smaller urban centers throughout the province?
I think that they're for sure willing to have that conversation. I think our municipal members really take our case to the provincial government and let our local representatives know what the needs are in our local communities. I get the realities of conflicting priorities in a limited budget. That's what our bread and butter, really. But so do I think that we're going to see significant action? In this budget, we didn't see any increases for FCSS services sort of anywhere. So tough to say if they're going to do some of that in the rural areas or not.
One of the big sounding alarms that Alberta Municipalities has been raising over the last year is the increase of the local government fiscal framework, which is the infrastructure funding that municipalities get from the provincial government. I read the budget, you read the budget, you and I chatted, did not see an increase that you have been calling for, and rightly so been asking for. What does this mean moving forward into this year? Because your infrastructure is aging, the challenges are growing, and if you don't get it fixed today, you're going to be paying a lot more next year.
And we'll continue to advocate for that $1 billion more on the local government fiscal framework funding pot. The formula itself works fairly well. Works well across the board. The biggest problem is that funding pot was too small to start off with. And we've got a $30 billion infrastructure deficit and growing across the province. And we're seeing huge growth. And so while that growth isn't paying for growth, we're seeing municipalities borrowing money to annex land and service that land and to be able to be accommodating to these new residents in Alberta. We're also seeing a bunch of infrastructure for a province that's over 100 years old, failing. And those municipalities need to see that support too. We're seeing less than half of what historically we would have received through the MSI grant coming through in the LGFF funding grant. So
what tangible item can people look at and say, if they were a resident of Red Deer or Medicine Hat, that they can say, because we didn't get LGFF, this is going to still be potentially dilapidated this year?
Roads, sidewalks falling apart, crumbling, right? All the infrastructure that's failing, big potholes, roads not being overlaid, new roads not being built, and not being able to expand your community to accommodate that growth. We're going to see a bunch of that, or you're going to see a bunch of municipalities borrowing more money to pay for that growth. And another thing that we're thankful for from the province is the lower interest rate of borrowing for municipalities. Again, something that Alberta municipalities had advocated for. It caused a bunch of municipalities not to do some of the projects they had planned on doing because the cost of borrowing was too high.
For a town like Calmer, I believe I'm pronouncing the name right.
We normally say Calmer.
Calmer. I apologize. I apologize. I'm gonna get nasty emails, I'm assuming right now. For a smaller community like yours, that means you're going to have to go to your residents and ask them to pay a little bit more at property taxes, and people are struggling right now. So how does Alberta municipalities work with the province and work to ensure that people aren't struggling on behalf of the municipalities? Is it a fine balancing act that municipalities have to walk through, Director?
Oh, it is a balancing act for sure. I think, we were just talking about FCSS and the challenges there. Most municipalities are funding beyond their required amount, the 20% that are supposed to come from your municipality. And what we're seeing right now with cuts to some of those areas is that the municipality has to step in. And so how do you deal with challenges related to say mental health or prevention work or families who are struggling, and we want to do those services in our communities. And the only way to do them is to ask those people to also pay more money in a time when you are struggling with inflation, you're struggling with economic realities. So there's this real catch-22 of how do you do some of those kinds of things. And they also want to have an arena for their kids to learn to skate. They also want to drive on roads that aren't full of potholes, and they like it when their toilets work. So it's really challenging to balance all of those competing priorities in a time when we know that people are struggling. It's hard.
What would you, and this is a question for both of you, if you don't mind answering, what would you say is the biggest infrastructure pressure that municipalities are facing today? Is it wastewater? Is it roads? Is it water? Is it sewer? What is the biggest challenge facing municipalities when it comes to this infrastructure deficit that we talk about?
I think it depends on the municipality. The city of Wetaskiwin just built a new wastewater treatment facility, did some upgrades to some of our water infrastructure, but that was $54 million, which is huge for a city of 13.5. Right. So I think it depends on your municipality. Kalmar might be seeing different issues, right?
I'm gonna say Kalmar for the rest of my life now. For towns across, what would you say is the biggest infrastructure challenge right now? Is it the same thing that President Gandam just talked about?
I mean, Tyler has a great point about it being really dependent on your municipality. I know communities who have, essentially failing pools. How do you get recreation funding to build anything in the municipal sector is so expensive. I always say that when I'm talking to residents that it's like when you order a cake and it's $50, you say it's for a wedding, it's now $300. If you say it's for your municipality, they assume you have unlimited pockets and now it's outrageously expensive. Probably the single biggest expense we have coming up is looking at expanding the capacity of our lagoon system, which while it's not going to be $54 million, it's probably $10 million. And we're a community of 2,300 people.
And it's relative, right? So we're 5 times your population.
Yeah.
It's the difference of the number of people and how much money it's going to cost you. So
yeah, and everywhere you look, it's honestly never under $1 million.
You never say never, right? Let's hope that it will be under $1 million. I want to turn to a topic that yourself and Minister McIver, Minister Ellis, and Mayor Janung from Cochrane all took part in earlier, I believe late February, early May, and that's around peace officers and community safety. How prepared are municipalities, because you just recently came off of your spring Municipal Leaders Caucus. I got to make sure I got that title wrong, right? How prepared are municipalities to implement the actions that were requested by the province around the community police officers?
So many that I talked to that received the letter from Minister Ellis about unified command were already doing it. A big part of that was making sure that there's good communication between your local police and your CPOs or your community peace officers. Many were already doing it. City of Wetaskiwin was already doing it, working closely together. And so I think it might help a few of the municipalities who didn't have that close of a relationship be able to help each other. They weren't looking for the CPOs to be frontline on Minister Ellis talked about going after cartels and doing drug rates and stuff like that. It was more so being conscious of what's going on in the community and being able to relay that back to your RCP or to your local police, and just being able to recognize maybe some of the signs of some drugs or fentanyl or any of the problems that we were seeing or that we're hearing from south of the border as being a bargaining chip for tariffs, whether they're coming or not. That obviously wasn't what that was about, but it's giving Albertans, it's giving our municipalities an opportunity to work closer together because we have to now, and you're going to see that open up across the country.
So I'm going to play a little bit of ignorant. I need you to explain it to me like I'm a 2-year-old here, because people may not know what a unified command is. So does that mean the province is coming in and taking over the peace officers in each municipalities and they're going to be in charge of them now? Or the municipality is going to be responsible for it? Explain this to me so that way people are going to see a peace officer in their community and say, oh, they're now a sheriff. Is that going to happen, or are they still peace officers?
They're still peace officers and they're still employees of the municipality. It just means that under we'll say if it's the RCMP, that detachment commander will have the opportunity to have better communication with their CPOs, working to make safer communities. And I don't know anybody that hasn't been asking to have a safer community. So it was really easy for the city of Wetaskiwin to get on board with that. And many of the other mid-cities and large towns that were asked of that unified command approach with their CPOs signed on to that letter like Minister Ellis had asked. We did a great press release up in Edmonton at Edmonton Police Headquarters. There was a bunch of CPO vehicles from across the province. Really good.
How does this help municipalities?
It's trying to create a safer community. So your CPOs will have maybe a little bit more leeway or a better understanding of what's happening in the community, and a better way of communicating with the local police. So they're going to be taught, or they're going to be explained on what things to look for. Like I said, many were already doing this before. This just gives some of our other communities an opportunity to expand their resources a little bit.
So the president talks about the cities and mid-sized cities. Is this something that towns would be interested in joining partnerships with? Because I know you guys, some towns don't have a full swath of community peace officers, but I know a few towns that have one or two. Is that something that towns are looking for and hoping to get a letter from either Minister McIver or Minister Ellis?
So our town did not get a letter, and we have 1.5 full-time CPOs. I don't know that we work closely already with our local RCMP detachment. I think we would be happy to help the cause, so to speak, right? And especially in the interest of community safety, I don't think we would ever say no. We're unwilling to help, right? Make our communities safer, and for communities that don't have peace officers, they also still want to have safe communities and things like that. So we're all looking for ways to work together and make our business more efficient, make our communities stronger. So
there's a balancing act that one has to take when we talk about crime. It seems like harm reduction is one of the major concerns that the province has. And as you talk about the fentanyl crisis that has been coming in from the States or going into the States from Canada, how do municipalities work with the province to better help municipalities, the province better help municipalities to ensure their communities are safe from these illicit drugs that have harmful consequences to residents and some who are not residents but are houseless?
I think making informed decisions and seeing what's working in other communities, whether it's across the province, across the country, understanding that what might work in Wetaskiwin may not work in Kalmar. And so making sure that you're flexible enough in the work that you're doing and how you're addressing those things. Wetaskiwin's got high social needs and has for a long time. And one of the things that we're doing to try to mitigate those issues is having a full-time permanent homeless shelter there, which is one piece of the puzzle for a 50-piece puzzle that is going to make this a better community, right? So we need the help from the RCMP. We need justice to step up in terms of not being a revolving door for repeat offenders. We need the shelter there to look after people's basic human needs. If you're not stealing for food, water, clothing, shelter, because you have that provided for you, maybe that creates a safer environment for the community as a whole. You need community members and residents to take an active part, and when you see something, report it. If you're seeing some suspicious or illegal activity, you got to be a part of the solution too, and making sure you're making those calls. So it's going to take a lot of moving parts to see some of those dynamics change and the culture shift in our community, but that's one piece of it, and the unified command with the RCMP and our CPOs is another piece of that too. Having the CPOs be able to respond to loitering or public intoxication or public drug or alcohol use is really important, because it doesn't then spread our RCMP members too thin responding to other calls. They could be more proactive as opposed to reactive.
10 years ago, Director, I would have said this is a big city issue, but I've been traveling across Alberta. My pledge is to get to all 434 municipalities by the end of this year, and I've chatted with a few mayors in the first 3 months of this travels, and some smaller urban towns are concerned because they have never had to deal with this, and now they are dealing with it. I'm not speaking off cuff because he talked to me on the record, but I was talking to Len Phillips, the acting mayor of Rocky Mountain House, and he said this is a concern for him. Are you seeing it in the smaller communities, and how does Alberta municipalities work together as a unified voice to advocate, to address these needs that are relatively new for some of these smaller communities?
Yeah, that's homelessness has become an issue in a lot of our smaller communities. Edson, Slave Lake, lots of Rocky Mountain House, and I think that it's part of it is because of a growing problem where you're seeing those pressures it's spreading out from just in the big cities and things like that. I don't think you see it too much in our really small communities because we just don't have the resources or the things available, the places to go. It's pretty noticeable when there's one guy in Kalmar, right? Like it's a little bit harder to look past it, I think, in your really small communities. AB Munis has worked, I think, really hard on making sure that we're advocating on the whole for everybody. And so even our smaller communities know that these are issues that affect all of our neighbors. And so we go out and speak on that in one voice from all of the sizes of our communities. I think we even do some of this work around. So we internally have a small communities committee, and it looks at all of these kinds of things from a small communities lens. So even knowing that that's maybe not a huge problem for Kalmar, for example, I recognize that it's a problem in other places, and then we look at that through a small communities lens. What does that look like for social supports once you get further out and in smaller communities? So we're making sure that we're always gathering that feedback in order to inform our message to the provincial government.
Do you have anything to add on that?
I was going to say, and it wasn't. Wetaskiwin's had those high social needs for a number of years, but when you look at Edson or Slave Lake, Rocky Mountain House, the places that didn't have this before, it's that growing trend and kind of the bubble and everything being pushed out of the big centers, moving into the smaller communities. So it wouldn't be too far-fetched to think that Kalmar might have to start dealing with some of these issues, right, as time goes on. So high social needs, mental health and addictions, rising costs of absolutely everything makes things incredibly hard for people to live.
Yeah.
So my last question for you, President Gandam, on this topic before I turn to the next segment. You and I and all three of us on this table right now know that mental health and addictions is not a municipal jurisdictional issue, but more and more municipalities are dealing with it. More and more municipalities are dealing with houselessness. We talk about LGFF funding, needing the province to come to the table. What does Alberta municipalities want from the province to help municipalities address this issue? Because you can't just say it's not our issue, it's the province's, because, and this is Chris saying this, not anyone else at the table, but you can't tell the province, you deal with it, I'm not going to, because your residents will be at your door the day after you say that and say, no, it is your issue because we've elected you.
And that's first of all, that's tricky part is some of my residents do say that this is not our issue. Why are we dealing with it? We shouldn't be putting resources into this. But if you want to continue to make us community safe, and that's not necessarily just looking after the needs, the social needs with the mental health and addictions. It's when you have a bike stolen from your yard and you call the RCMP and nobody's responding to that call because they're dealing with other things. So if collectively the municipality and the province aren't dealing with that, then you get other things happening with your levels of service. Or if you go to the emergency department and you're waiting there for 5 or 6 hours, that's because somebody's in there with undiagnosed, untreated medical needs, and that's another strain on our healthcare. So while I can appreciate that mental health addictions, homelessness isn't a municipal problem, it definitely has impacts in our communities, and it's going to create problems when you are calling the police for a stolen bicycle and you're not getting a police officer there, or you don't see as many police cars patrolling because they're dealing with other social needs.
I appreciate that answer. The last time I asked you, it's not in my jurisdiction, and we ware literally in the other room in the Alberta municipalities. I got 2 nasty emails from people saying, no, cops aren't in the jurisdiction of the municipality, and they shouldn't be, and it should be all up to the provincial government. But you're correct. The municipalities are the front line, right? And they're the ones who are dealing with it. And if you don't deal with it,
yeah. And we need to continue to work with the province on that. They're looking at building another 8 treatment facilities.
Yeah.
So I think things are happening. Would I like to see them faster? Because we're not going to get ahead of this at the rate that we're trying to address it. So like I said, working on some of the preventative things, FCSS is a big part of that, and giving organizations the tools to be able to address some of these things, because municipalities shouldn't be. And yeah, it's challenging. It's challenging and it's frustrating.
Speaking of challenging and frustration, can't believe I have to talk about him, but here we are. President Donald Trump has played the on and off game with the Canada-U.S. trade relationship, and on again with tariffs, off again with tariffs, and that impacts municipalities, that impacts businesses, that impacts everyday people. We are in a sort of a grace period until April 2nd when the retaliatory tariffs will be put on, and we're not sure what that means, whether it be that 25% on Canadian goods and 10% on Canadian resources. What can municipalities do in the short term, President Gandam, to address and help local businesses who might be struggling during this economic uncertainty that is sort of forced upon us by our biggest trading partner down south?
I think we do a decent job of shopping local, buying local, trying to buy from your community first, province, and then the country. But I think we need to make a more conscious effort into making sure that when we are buying things, it is local or it is within our province or the country. As a municipality, we've already started to look at when we're buying equipment or if we're buying whatever it happens to be. Everything should be sourced as much as possible from Alberta or from Canada, and making sure that any of the replacement parts that we need for that, especially for some of our heavy equipment, doesn't have to come across the border as well. So we're not paying tariffs on replacement parts for that too. So I think setting ourselves up with local equipment, local procurement is going to help. But it's a wait and see. And I think something that I'd like to see happen is not jumping every time a threat is made. I don't know how many times you can walk something back and then threaten it again later on, and it's got everybody in a tizzy. But I understand that there are real consequences to if and when tariffs are put into place. But I think continuously being reactive to threats being made isn't going to do any good. I think we just continue to focus on how we're going to improve what we're currently doing and dealing with whatever may come that is completely out of our control.
Director, at the most recent Spring Caucus, I was speaking to some of the mayors and councillors there, and this was the top of the mind conversation. This was right at the time when they were coming off the tariffs or coming back on. I don't really remember. Maybe it was like 3 hours and it was on and off again. But what did you hear at the caucus to get a better sense of what municipalities are doing to support that local, buy local first, and then buy provincial, then buy Canadian perspective? Because Premier Smith, along with Minister Ellis, Minister Amory, I'm just trying to remember all the people who were in that convention, that media, this press conference, they were talking about municipalities should only procure from Canadian companies. Do you get a sense that municipalities heard that and want to only buy Canadian?
I definitely think they heard that. I would say that we've already done that. For the most part, I think municipalities are well aware of supporting local, wanting to, I mean, generally speaking, the further away you source your goods, the more expensive they cost to ship here. But I think that we're definitely willing to do that work. We heard that call. I think we're happy to support that, right? We're all proud Albertans. We're all proud Canadians. We want to do our part too. So, yeah.
And for smaller communities like Kalmar, we got to make sure I get that right here. You know the local business owners. Larger cities, urban centers may not know everyone who owns a business, but in your community, I guarantee you, you know everyone who owns the gas stations. You know everyone.
I sure do. They know me too.
How important is it to have a good working relationship with the business community during this sort of economic uncertain time with the global trade wars that we're going through?
I think it's important. It's important always to have a good relationship with your community stakeholders, and our businesses are obviously a really important part of that. During these kinds of uncertain times, I want our businesses to know that their council, that our administration will do whatever we can to support them. Our economic development officer, that we're already doing those kinds of things. We're reaching out, finding out. I mean, same as during COVID, right? About finding what are the programs out there? How can we help you deal with some of these things? We also have, and Tyler and I actually share this, a really strong chamber in our region that does fantastic work in supporting businesses. And so are we connecting people to the right people and making sure that people have that, and at a minimum that they know that we have their back, right? And so I think that sort of across the board that we're all willing to support our local businesses however we can.
Well, I'll turn to my last subject because I'm cautious of time here, and I know we are all busy people and we all have other things that we need to get back to. There's an important date coming up in October 2025, and that is municipal election, as I like to call it, silly season, when the candidates start coming out of the woodworks, where council candidates, where councillors, mayors start thinking about their re-election, if they're going to run or start stepping down. We've seen a few already, 2 in Edmonton, a few in Calgary. A few mayors that I've spoken to off the record have all said that they're not going to be re-offering again. Starting with you, Director. I was going to say Kalmar, but that's not your name. It's Venus J. What qualities should someone look for in themselves to be a good municipal leader in 2025?
Oh, that is a great question. I think.
Just list all your ads. And then,
I mean, right there. I mean, like, obviously, first of all, strong reading comprehension, I think, is important. There's an enormous amount of reading. The ability to look at diverse viewpoints and sort of synthesize conflicting opinions and be able to find a way forward out of some of those kinds of things. That's probably one of the most important things. Strong communication skills. I think that's become more important than ever to be able to, one, in order to participate, effectively in debate at your council table, to be able to persuade people to your viewpoint, but then to go out and tell those stories to the public. I think that that's become so much more a part of my job than even it was when I first ran. Some other qualities. I mean, you could just make a whole list here, like authenticity and responsibility and integrity and, and willingness to stand up for what you believe in. I think that's an important thing. And really probably one of the most fundamental things, and I think Tyler is actually such a great example of this, is about relationship building, and going out and finding your support network and talking to the people in your community, your business owners, the coaches volunteering at soccer. Like, what do they need? How can you help them? How do you move your community forward and be able to take that and put it into a vision and then bring it to the council table? It's a tall list.
It's a tall list. So then I'm going to throw the mayor in the room. What's a good quality in a prospective mayoral candidate that people should be looking at themselves if they're going to put their name on the ballot for mayor? And I know saying that some municipalities don't elect their mayors at whole, they elect them within council, but for those municipalities who do elect mayors at whole, as in the entire community gets to vote, what should a prospective candidate be looking at themselves for?
I think the biggest part about being a mayor is that you're not the boss. You're not the deciding vote.
What?
I know.
Yeah. Breaking news on the cross-border network.
Strong mayor powers don't exist in Alberta.
Hey, they're going to Nova Scotia, so give it a few weeks.
Thankfully not. I don't believe that there should be strong mayor powers. I think there is power in democracy, and I think that's the reason you have 5, 7, 13, 15 members of council to make those decisions. Mm-hmm. You need to be a good listener. You need to be able to hear both sides. You need to be able to sit back and take things in and not be the one who's speaking first all the time. And build relationships. It can be extremely hard sometimes. And sometimes no matter what you do, it's never going to be good enough, and you have to be okay with that. But being able to listen and being able to articulate, being okay with you say we're a council of 3, you 2 vote in favor of something, I vote against it. As the mayor, I'm going out there and I'm the spokesperson, and I'm sharing the good news of what Councillor Brown and Councillor Gardner have done for our community of Kalmar. Because democracy matters, and if I'm the dissenting vote and I don't agree with what's happening, I still have to deliver that message that this is the will of council. So there are a lot of moving parts. Chairing a meeting is probably the easiest part of being a mayor. There are so many behind the scenes things that are happening, dealing with council, dealing with council and administration relationships, working with business owners. It doesn't matter who you are. As soon as you have that title of mayor, you're the go-to all the time. And rightly or wrongly, that's part of what the role is, I think.
Okay, I've got to ask the sort of $1 million question, because every municipal election, there will be the one issue candidates that come forward, and they have the right to put their name on the ballot. And I will never stop anyone from getting on the ballot, because that's what democracy is. What's your advice to those candidates who say, I'm very passionate about sewer systems and I really want to fix our sewer systems and after that I am done? What's your advice to those one issue candidates?
It's going to be a really boring 4-year term if you're able to get your one issue dealt with in 6 months and you don't have anything else on the table to contribute to the rest of your term. It goes by in a flash, but at the same time, there's a ton of work that happens over those 4 years that if you're coming in as a one issue candidate, you're probably not going to enjoy your term, or you may not be the best candidate for the community if that's all you care about.
Krista, Director, I apologize. There might be some people who are listening to this or watching this and saying, oh, a mayor, a councillor, you work 1 day a week and that's all you do. Like there's not much. You guys complain for the sake of complaining, but you really have an easy job. How much of a time commitment is the role of a mayor, of a councillor to your community to be an effective leader?
Ooh. I mean, I think ballpark, and Kalmar's a small community, ballpark, I'd probably spend about 15 hours a week doing council stuff. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less. A lot of it is reading things and research and stuff in advance of I actually keep telling my administration the least amount of time I spend doing this job is sitting in council chambers doing council meetings. A really big piece, though, that I would let people know in advance. I have not been to a social event in Kalmar in 9 years where I have not been asked about municipal issues. And so you need to be able to, to say, I don't know the answer if I don't know the answer and I'll get back to you, but you need to know your stuff. People do expect that you're well informed, that you show up prepared and you're ready to go, that you have an opinion. At least you should have an opinion if you're going to run. Please come with an opinion. I appreciate that. But it's a much bigger job than just I sit in 2 council meetings a month and I have some committees. It's much bigger than that, even in a small community like mine. Mm-hmm. And Tyler, I'm sure it's even further than that as you get bigger.
Yeah, and to a point, I think you can get to a point where you're in a large community where when you go to the grocery store, people might not know who you are. Mm. But in anything under 15 or 20,000 people have a pretty good idea of who you are, and you're never not a councillor. You're never not a mayor. You can be at the grocery store. You can be out for dinner. People will stop by your table. I've been at family members' funerals where somebody's like, this probably isn't the right place to do this, but what about, and then start into you. I said, no, you're right. This isn't the place to do this. We can talk about this on Monday. And I think you have to be okay with some moving and some changing of conversations, especially when things like that aren't appropriate. But you are never not a member of council, no matter what.
Municipal council is a family affair as well. Your family supports the backing of you. And as you said, you go out to the grocery store. I'm assuming your wife doesn't let you go anymore because she doesn't want to deal with the long waits. Your husband, on the other hand, may be the same way. How important is to have that family support when you get home? Because you deal with some very challenging things on a regular basis, and your support system and even the greater municipal family of Alberta municipalities, how important is it to have that support system when you're going through this? Because it can kind of be an island upon yourself sometimes.
Oh, yes. Short answer, yes. I think it's incredibly important one, that your family understands what you're getting yourself into before you decide to run, because I think my husband was really surprised at the amount of time and the amount of commitment that it actually was. I don't think he expected that. And then, yes, he keeps saying, oh my gosh, I have to take care of my own children. Yes, you do. You're not a babysitter, sweetheart. But I think even from the larger family perspective, I have found it so valuable to go to AB Muni's events and sort of talk with your peers and be like, you have this problem too. Me too. How are you dealing with it? Okay, great. It's going well for you. I love that. I'm going to take that idea back for me. And having people that understand, I think, what that looks like is so valuable, because the average person, when you're saying about one issue candidates, the average person in your community has no idea the depth and breadth of things that your municipal council is in charge of, that is ultimately responsible for. And so then people are like, well, why can't you do whatever? And you're like, well, actually, I can't. Legislatively, that's not allowed, or whatever the thing is. And so it is really helpful to have those people that understand where you're coming from and know what you're talking about. So,
yeah. Family and networking is so important. Having that support at home, and Krista said it too, like going to events. I spent today at RMA's spring conference. Bunch of familiar faces, friends, colleagues, and people that I can reach out to when I am having issues, or when I need to ask a question about, I know you went through this, because everything's publicized so much now. I don't know if you know this, but Chris Brown does this podcast keeps everybody up to date.
Whoa. What's happening? TV show as well now. We went big leagues this year.
Well, we know what's happening in different municipalities. And so you can reach out to them when you know that they're going through a hard time, or when you are and you know that somebody else has gone through something similar. That networking is so important. You don't know how good you have it until you're able to call somebody and be like,
I do want to mention that on the Alberta Municipalities website, which is abmunis.com, if I'm not mistaken, .ca, there are video links to Alberta Municipalities put together some videos to showcase what it means to be a municipal councillor. So I highly recommend it. For those who are watching on YouTube, the links will be in the show notes. For anyone else, please head over to crossborderinterviews.ca, and the links will be in the show notes in the Alberta Municipalities Roundtable. Last parting question to you, sir. You have hired a new executive director. We are now about 100 days in. How's the transition been for Alberta municipalities from Dan Rood to Dana Mackey?
It's been really good. We've been moving things in a positive direction. Dan Rood has some big shoes to fill. And I know
Dan Rood has big shoes to fill.
He left big shoes to fill.
Were huge. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that was one of the things that I think we worried about as an association, as a board. Who's going to be able to come in here and make that transition? And Dana's been fantastic and very personable, easy to get along with. He'll reach out to you if he's got questions. He's not afraid to question what we've been doing and why, not because he thinks it's wrong, but because he wants to understand it. So I'm getting a feeling from staff as well that they feel comfortable with him. That transition's been working well. So I think he's fitting in well. I got to spend the day with him today at RMA, and he seems to really be enjoying it. It's a lot of work. There's a lot of information, but he enjoys the challenge, and so no, it's been good.
Last question for both of you. I know I said that was last question, but I've always got one more, and it's the forward-thinking question. What's next? We got 8 more months until the next municipal election. I'm assuming Alberta Municipalities does not end their work as of the spring convention, and nothing happens between now and October 21st. So what does Alberta Municipalities do now that you're sort of in this weird period between municipal elections? Krista?
Well, you were talking about the videos we've put together. We're still working on our Fostering a Culture of Respect plan with resources available both for candidates, for municipalities, so that they don't all have to go and create that from scratch for themselves, about how does a municipal council work? What are you getting yourself into? So we have a bunch of things related to candidates, related to the election, then training and stuff after that, right? So that's coming forward. We have summer MLC. We're going to take our show on the road, so to speak. So that's going to be really exciting. That's in the month of June. We kind of go out and do some more educational pieces there with our members, and just keep on keeping on, right? Pushing forward. Yeah.
We've got spring session going on right now. I'm sure there'll be some more legislation. Last year kept us busy with some of the advocacy work, making sure that we were letting the province know what we could do to help with that consultation. Some of the legislation that came out that we thought maybe could be improved. So I suspect we'll be doing that this spring. The summer municipal leaders caucuses across the province. We try to hit the 4 corners of the province and get to some of the communities that don't get to see us as often. So that'll be really good. We do a joint strategic session with our AMSC board, with our Alberta Munis board. So we had to work on what the business side of things look like, trying to create as much of an opportunity for municipalities across the province to make their life easier, whether that's on the business side of benefits and insurance and high interest savings accounts and all of the fun things that we do that helps fund our advocacy, as well as the advocacy itself, and making sure that our members feel heard. We do member visits outside of those spring and summer MLCs, where a number of board members will get together and go and visit 4 or 5 different communities in a couple of days and get to check out what Raymond has to offer. And so we'll go tour around there with their council. And so we make stops throughout the province. And
if there's one place you need to go this year, Bow Island.
Oh, yeah?
Just go see Pinto. Gordon Reynolds, the mayor there, is fantastic. So go down there.
Yep.
Mayor, or President, Director, thank you so much for doing this. This has been an honor and pleasure, and I'm sorry for keeping you a little bit longer than anticipated. It's always a pleasure. Before we go, a reminder that the Alberta Municipalities link will be in the show notes for anyone who wants to find it. It's abmunis.ca. I'm getting the nod here, even though I'm not looking at them. So check it out. And if you want to get involved, do it. Democracy only works when people get involved. So until then, talk to you guys later.
This episode of Municipal Affairs was brought to you in partnership with Alberta Municipalities. Now, we hope you've enjoyed today's conversation and gained some valuable insights into the valuable work that Alberta Municipalities is doing on behalf of municipalities across the province of Alberta. To stay in the loop with all of our latest episodes and search past episodes, don't forget to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform or on YouTube. And follow us on social media at Cross Border Network. For even more content and learn more about the people and the stories that we feature on this show, visit us online at crossborderinterviews.ca. Your support means the world to us, so share this episode with your friends, your family, and yes, even your community, and help keep the conversation going. Until next time, stay informed, stay engaged, and we're back with a brand new episode of Municipal Affairs shortly. Till then, everyone.